Historic moment. U.S. House approves $95 billion aid package for Ukraine and IsraelTop of form. Washington, April 20th. Reuters. The U.S. House of Representatives showed significant bipartisan unity on Saturday as it approved a $95 billion legislative package aimed at bolstering security assistance to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, despite strong opposition from Republican hardliners. The bill will now advance to the Democratic-controlled Senate, mirroring a similar measure passed more than 2 months ago. Both Democratic President Joe Biden and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell had been pressing Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson to bring the bill to the floor for a vote. The Senate is slated to commence deliberations on the House-approved bill next Tuesday, with preliminary votes scheduled for that afternoon. Final approval is anticipated sometime during the following week, paving the way for President Biden to enact it into law. The legislative package allocates $60.84 billion to address the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, with $23 billion earmarked for replenishing U.S. weaponry, supplies, and infrastructure. Additionally, $26 billion is allocated for Israel, including $9.1 billion designated for humanitarian assistance and $8.12 billion for the Indo-Pacific region, with a focus on supporting Taiwan. Expressing his gratitude, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky commended U.S. lawmakers for their decisive action in keeping history on the right track. The crucial aid bill passed today by the House will help prevent the escalation of conflict, save countless lives, and fortify the bonds between our nations, Zelensky remarked on X. The timeline for the depletion of the newly allocated military funding for Ukraine remains uncertain, potentially necessitating further congressional action in the near future. Biden, who has been advocating for additional aid to Ukraine since last year, emphasized the critical nature of the support, stating, "It comes at a moment of grave urgency, with Israel facing unprecedented attacks from Iran and Ukraine under continued bombardment from Russia." The vote on the Ukraine funding saw a decisive margin of 311 to 112. Notably, 112 Republicans opposed the legislation, while only 101 supported it. Following the vote, far-right Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene commented on House Speaker Mike Johnson's leadership, saying, "Mike Johnson is a lame duck. He's done." Greene, a prominent opponent of aiding Ukraine in its conflict with Russia, has previously threatened to remove Johnson from office over this issue, although she did not take action on Saturday. During the vote, some lawmakers waved small Ukrainian flags in support of the package, prompting Johnson to warn against what he deemed a violation of decorum. The House's rare Saturday session also highlighted divisions within Congress over support for Israel. Despite traditionally strong bipartisan backing for Israel, 37 Democrats and 21 Republicans opposed the Israel aid package, which passed by a margin of 366 to 58. Recent months have witnessed growing criticism from progressive Democrats towards Israel's government and its actions in Gaza. The passage of the long-awaited legislation drew significant attention from U.S. defense contractors, who stand to benefit from potential contracts to supply equipment for Ukraine and other U.S. allies. Despite facing threats of ouster from hardline members of his slim majority, Johnson opted to move forward with the measure, which includes crucial funding for Ukraine as it continues to combat a Russian invasion that has persisted for 2 years. The comprehensive four-bill package also encompasses provisions addressing the Chinese-owned social media platform TikTok, with a looming threat of a ban and the potential allocation of seized Russian assets to Ukraine. Some staunch Republicans, adamantly opposed to further aid for Ukraine, have raised concerns about the United States' burgeoning $34 trillion national debt, arguing that the country cannot afford additional expenditures. These voices have repeatedly called for the removal of Speaker Johnson, who assumed the position in October following the ousting of his predecessor, Kevin McCarthy, by hardline factions within the party. Acknowledging the imperfections of the legislation, Johnson emphasized its necessity under the current circumstances, stating, "It's not the perfect legislation. It's not the legislation that we would write if Republicans were in charge of both the House, the Senate, and the White House. This is the best possible product that we can get under these circumstances to take care of these really important obligations." Representative Bob Good, chair of the Hardline House Freedom Caucus, criticized the bills, characterizing them as a descent into deeper fiscal crisis and policies that prioritize interests other than those of the American people. He remarked, "This represents a slide down into the abyss of greater fiscal crisis and America Last policies that reflect Biden and Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries, and don't reflect the American people." However, former President Donald Trump, a significant figure within the Republican Party, expressed his support for Speaker Johnson on April 12 and reiterated the importance of Ukraine's survival for the United States in a social media post on Thursday.